Welcome back to the Cannabis Podcast. I appreciate you all for being here. And it's been way too long since we've caught up with AC Moon, proverbial expert, in my opinion, about basically all things cannabis. So how you doing?
I'm doing good, man. How about yourself? I mean, winter is coming. Winter is coming for the Northern Hemisphere. So
It
yeah,
is. It is.
it's
For everybody watching, tell us a little bit about kind of what you're doing right now. You said it's harvesting season, right now.
yeah. In Humboldt, Nevada County, and just general in Northern California, we've been going through. I came back from the Virgin Islands to help finish harvest for my own farm and a few other farms, and it's been a lot of work as always, and it's been a nice, like, wet one the last couple of weeks. So some long-winded and, purple anthocyanin bearing plants are, fighting between trying to mature fast enough and getting botrytis or bud rot or, it's a real, opportunity to really get to see like what genetics can do. And if one's hardy or one's not, or like any of the stress tests are definitely coming right now at the end of the year to know exactly what you're messing with. So it's just a soggy one. It's been raining the last couple of days and it definitely got a bit muddy and snapping that cold snap right on down. So
Right.
whew, we got the plants everywhere.
Now, are you guys harvesting indoors or outdoors?
Outdoor and greenhouse. Well, greenhouse through the first part up until early October, and then it's just a flood of outdoor the whole time. And so, like, I don't like to force a plant through its entire cycle unless I'm working for others in the large indoor facilities. But I do like to keep, mothers and do vegetative cycles in the indoor just because I I get to have like colder months or, those backfire months or down in the islands, it's cooler days because it's too hot there sometimes to do some of the propagation. And so either one, have a little bit more controlled environment sometimes is just nice on the body and it spoils you though. So I like to keep farming outdoors.
I mean, everything you're saying, people are gonna know soon. I mean, you're talking about CBD, CBN, THC, like the levels that you grow per.
Right.
People are all they know about is THC for the most part.
Right.
But now
Well, there's
you're,
124 different cannabinoids that are going to be expressed through plants, if not more, that we haven't fully labeled. And so, and those become what we call bioavailable through precursors. And so, like Delta 8 is a precursor to Delta 9, and so on and so forth. Each of the different cannabinoids are attached and have tails or open molecular bonds
mm,
that create the next bond with the next cannabinoid, which allows it to burst and become bioavailable so that we feel a different element of that high. So albeit, anything from pain relief to anti-epileptic or any of the effects. So of course we know that all the different genetics they all interact with our bodies and our specific metabolisms very differently. And so it's all a conquest of trying to figure out like what works for our specific bodies.
it's
And
it's
cannabinoids and being able to play with them as a farmer is a really important factor because some genetics you're going to want to harvest earlier and some you're going to want to harvest later. And that's really going to be about like your target trichrome production, your target cannabinoid production, and what you want available there in those extractions at the time that you're harvested. So it could be like a whole range of things that you're targeting that helps you make that decision on when to harvest.
so can in theory, so for everybody's understanding, if you're growing a batch right now for a specific trichome, you don't just use it for that and then get rid of it. You still use all the other, as much as you can in other ways, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And actually, now in California and in many other places, the extraction market has come to where entire farms are turned into fresh frozen rosin.
Mm.
And that includes the colas and all other aspects. While some farms will harvest the larger colas and process the rest of the colas into a hash that is cold water extraction or down to BHO or making diamonds out of it. Many different options that you can have in the way of like what you're going to do with an extraction element once you know, harvest your plant. But it's just the difference on if you're going to harvest fresh frozen or if you're going to extract it after it's dry material. And so as long as that plant matter has trichrome on it, me particularly, I take a lot of time during harvest to eradicate all the sun leaves or any of the leaves that do not have trichrome matter on it, because that is just a lot of biomass that we don't want to, bother having to process.
Right.
And so at those points, I just make sure that all of that leaves off of that plant before I harvest. I don't want to deal with, drying it or having to deal with it in a controlled setting. So anything that doesn't have trichrome on it, it's removed before it goes into the processing room. And so
Right.
anything else that has trichrome on it, yes, we definitely will use it. Once we harvest that flower matter, we'll turn that rest into some good old fashioned hash, may it be cold water, BHO, or uh, the different factors. And
Nice.
I love that part. It's just a fine art. Each aspect of those is a fine art of its own for sure.
Right. And that's what fascinates me about the plant is that it's basically the whole thing you can use from top to
Right.
bottom, just depending on what you're going to use it for, what you need, or what it's supplying, I guess I should say.
Mhm.
What's available in the plant at the time that you harvest it,
Absolutely.
which is
And the
fascinating.
earlier harvestings are, back in the days, there was all this stereotype, which I've been working very hard to eliminate the stereotype of saying that sativas are uppers and indicas are downers, which is it's not true at all. Those
Hmm.
terms are, the Latin nomenclature are specific to botanists, and they're supposed to be identifying,
Hmm.
the structure of the plant, the climates that it grows, its habits, its leaf, palmate or affectate, or all the different things. And so those things, sativa only means to cultivate. In Latin, it just means cultivated. And so it doesn't really have it doesn't mean anything else. And so people have put a lot of conjecture into believing that these linear leaf tropical growing plants are going to create a more uppity high, but it's not true at all. I've actually had some of the most potent smoke I worked with is in the Caribbean or in the tropics in the lower Southeast Asia or
Okay.
Morocco. And it's actually because of
So go there.
their their curing practices are actually creating a fermentation process at that point.
Uh,
Because of the high
makes
humidity,
makes sense.
there's often a symbiosis with fungal enzymes and other things that cause their curing processes to be a little bit more challenging, and that's speaking of Southeast Asia more than the Caribbean, which is a little bit more sterile of an environment since it's surrounded by salt water. And
Mm.
so
Yeah.
it's really but there's such an amazing difference between the entire thing. And just to finish what I was answering your question was, so presently we've been doing harvest in NorCal, but I do work in the United States Virgin Islands right now. We're launching our first cannabis course with Elevate WI.vi. And so we're helping the entrepreneurs enter the first legal cannabis commerce sector, where we're helping different manufacturing license right now, gaining partners for manufacturing licenses, helping farmers build their first micro cultivation licenses, and
Oh,
retail consumption lounge and all those types of things. So I've been down there for the last 3 years helping them as Indica Innovations International, and that's been super fun. So as we've been discussing, like the vast difference of northern hemisphere and equatorial is, whew, it's drastic. It's 50 degrees drastic, but it's really
mm.
drastic sometimes.
People don't think about that. They don't think about like the growing conditions everywhere. They just think, I guess people make it simply compartmentalized, like it's like wine. Like, oh, this is red wine from here
No,
and white wine from here, not knowing that the cannabis industry growing and distribution, all that kind of stuff is not as progressed as the wine, you know, one is yet.
right, right. And that's the concept of, as we spoke about other times, the appellation. And
Mm,
appellate is the concept of how endemic regions produce endemic processes. They have endemic water, air, soil, all these special things that make it just special there. So,
Hmm.
the French Alps are very specific in their cultivation of wine, Napa Valley and things like that. And it's because that terroir, which is the soil that is from there, it's a specific soil that is from any given place. That specific endemic terroir creates that appellation. And in cannabis, we've been learning for 10 years now how to start applying that to, creating these genetics where we have pretty much an intellectual property right as a gold star because Northern California has produced gold star, Humboldt, Nevada County, Mendocino and other places. And so with our appellation having old cultivation processes,
Right.
that's where that concept comes from. That same modeled after the wine industry. And hopefully we're going to be able to expand that and get a little bit more IP coverage for genetic workers and breeders and the echoes similar to the wine industry, as you're saying. It's an important factor for everybody.
Yeah. Especially now going into, you know, possible rescheduling of the plant in the United States. So, what do you, what would you think would happen after that would happen? Assume that they do it. Um, will it have an
Well,
effect?
I've been watching this topic hard, and it makes me so nervous because scheduling has been the only thing that's kept like big pharma off our dick, basically. And so that one law that made it so that most of that botanical and research and things like that have happened in Israel and other parts of Europe, we haven't been able to obtain that research, and it's been a definite deafening point for cannabis innovation, but it's kept it at a grassroots level that's allowed us to innovate some community that we probably wouldn't have been able to had we already had lobbyists that were in big pharma with their hands in there. So
Right.
rescheduling actually raises the minimum mandatory sentencing for cannabis, and so it makes us become more criminal if we haven't falled it fell underneath the jurisdiction of what parameters they've set forth for any specific place. And
Right.
so when they're able to raise the minimum mandatory sentencing, I feel like that's really procurement, especially when you look at the fact that most of the judicial system is corrupt in most factors, and prison systems are privatized, and they're privatized for investor commerce and for profit. And so when you have privatized prison systems and corrupt systems that feed the privatized prison systems, I feel like that's a real red flag point there. And then we get into the factor that Germany, in Munich, Germany, which is where Bayer Pharmaceuticals is, they
Yep.
are, they're already, synthesizing cannabinoids and creating what we call syncans. And syncans are synthetic cannabinoids that will basically make it so that they're able to isolate any isotope, such as the cannabinoids that we're speaking of, and being able to create a synthesized or expanded version of that in a much cheaper fashion, which is hard to believe because cannabis cultivation can be cheap if done properly. It just has to be done properly using, soils and amendments and composting aspects that are, natural and organic and regenerative. But with rescheduling, not only is it going to up those factors, it's going to open the door for lobbyists to be able to basically control the industry. And so once they control the industry by entering, we already see it through like Nevada, where, the largest, cannabis dispensary chains lobbied to have, home grow within 25 miles of a dispensary in Nevada is a felony still. So they pose it as, oh, this is legalization, this is recrealization, but really the underscore is if you follow within the taxable situation that is these
Right.
dispensaries that purchase these laws, and it's very very corrupt systems. And so, especially Nevada, which I mean, and Southern California, which a lot
Yeah.
of it just got bought and paid for, just like New York, a lot of different places got bought and paid for by different lobbyists that served to commerce off of the new industry or taxation in some form. So I think those are going to be the burgeoning red flags. And the fact that once the oligarchy gets their hands in it, then they will melt down, as we've already seen, the value of it till no one can make any money doing it anyways. And it liquidates pretty much 98% of the mom and pop or small farms, and they'll be able to commerce it in a large agricultural sector, which will eventually be, further toxified by pesticides or other genetic modification and going into diploid and viroids that will deafen the population of genetics that are exchanged throughout the world and make them seedless. And then it will erase cannabis from the hands of the average person. And such as tobacco and other things have had that done and won't be available. Oh, I'd say within 10 years, they'll try to erase that. And you'll have nothing but vaporizer pens and things that are
Ugh.
elementals that are smoking it, through like a vape pen that gets you high because they're synthetic and or stepped on natural cannabinoids that have been grown in large agricultural areas by completely corrupt monopolies of oligarchies.
I,
That's I think about it way too much because I want to find a way to keep the power a little bit, but it's a hard tip once they finally if they reschedule it, it's a hard tip because that's more money than all of us combined
yep.
in the grassroots industry, all of
The,
us.
when they already
And
started, I tried to find it the other day, but I couldn't find it. But they already did a super PAC for cannabis, and Philip Morris is on the board. And I think another biopharma firm was. But all these other places, to your point, they just legalized in Lebanon, and then they just legalized in Colombia.
Mhm.
But they also
Right.
guaranteed them distribution to pharmaceutical companies. And they, to your point,
And that's
they
that
didn't mention
entry
anything
point,
about
right?
home grow at all.
Right. And that's the point is to be able to make it's capitalizing it in a very controlled way so that they can
Hmm.
persecute and control. And I find it to be the one point of humanity that we can still like have a spitting chance on, if we don't let them do that. We
Yeah.
can't let them erase the culture. And that will be I do fear that quite often. They've
Yeah.
already mass produced hemp to the point of where there's no value, and all my hemp farmer friends are like, I mean, there's no space for us, but it's the same plant. Like, according to the nomenclature law, the Latin botanical nomenclature, Cannabis sativa is Cannabis sativa, and Cannabis indica is just a form of Cannabis sativa. So when you read a law that says that Cannabis sativa is legal, all cannabis is legal
Hmm.
because that is all, it's one and the same plant, and it's decreed underneath international law that it is the same plant. It is written in that nomenclature. And so that's why I really push towards with the Botanical Congress, gaining a group of different people within the genomic sector is to try to like gain all the different samples from different corners of the world to better like identify the separated point of Cannabaceae to the family genus species and better identify that indica is and should mean indica only means from India. And we know that all indica genetics aren't all from India. We know that there's a great amount of indica form genetics from all over the world. And so
You
it's
mean
a
it doesn't mean in the
bastardization
couch?
of what's that?
I said it doesn't mean in the couch, actually.
No.
In
Indica,
indica in the couch, it doesn't mean that.
right. Where'd you go, man? I don't know. Checking the couch. Like, no, it's real. And I just think that but for us, the separating those terms and getting a better linear understanding globally of what the Latin botanical nomenclature will be able to express, we'll
Hmm.
be able to battle those laws more efficiently because we're going to be able to show that, cannabis sativa hemp is non-cannabinoid bearing. That's the type one. And then type two would go further on to the long linear leaf that's tropical and more longer growing. Well, one would be Cannabis spontanea, which is what the Europeans call ruderalis.
Mm.
And spontanea just means Latin for spontaneously blooming, which that could mean, that at least identifies it away from cannabis sativa, cannabis indica, um, and with no specific epithet. So baby steps everywhere, but it's good to be able to start realizing where we can start making some global understanding changes that might trickle down eventually to politics if we start having a real linear understanding on what that means. because it
Yeah.
gets crazy when nobody can understand
Well,
donkey butt. Like, no,
and to your point, yes, the big pharma lobby has a lot of money, but it's also the problem that the cannabis lobby doesn't have any money. They don't have anybody there fighting for cannabis activism really at all. I mean, aside
no, it's
from,
just grassroots alliances that have created these groups, or we have like normal or Americans for Safe Access, which have been legendary key points in our culture for, tens and tens of years. But it's like we've said, like there, even if we got Glass House to completely sponsor it, or every single influencer and celebrity that is interested in cannabis, from Belushi all the way down uh, to Woody Harrelson, there, it would not even put a drop in the bucket to
no,
the billions of dollars that are available in big pharma lobbying, and
yeah,
their ability to just steer
or
international
alcohol or,
right.
anything that's any
Steer
other lobby, like cannabis lobbies,
insurance,
the
medical,
least.
like life insurance, like all of it is all in some way tied to these, greater understanding of how the whole chessboard of commerce works. And so,
Well,
skepticism.
how do you think they'll even teach cannabis? Like, I know you're starting classes, but like I always tell people that watch the videos, hey, go to your physician or doctor and ask them point blank, tell me everything you know about the endocannabinoid system
Right.
and see what they say. And if they
Well,
say, I
there's
don't,
different universities now that are offering, medicinal, like University of Penn State. Different ones are offering like Beal, like subclass or MS, and starting to, offer education to medical doctors specifically on cannabinoid science or ester science, or different prognostic, ways of dealing with it, or in a pharmaceutical sense. But like Oaksterdam and ones that I've worked with before, like there's, it's still so grassroots. You can't, battle. When I was working with the University of Virgin Islands, our classes were, canceled because the new president of the university didn't agree with cannabis. So we had to
hmm,
go in a different way and find another host. And now Elevate WI is nice enough to host us. And it's it's just a challenge of having it federally scheduled into this taboo region, and then having scholastics funded by federal, and then knowing that it would cross the law, breaking the law if they offered certain classes. And so that's where it's been a real challenge, is finding the schools that kind of have the balls to be like, hey, we're privately funded or whatever, or create
right,
these private entities like Gaudier, Oaksterdam, or other ones that have been created. So it's it's multifaceted, but it's hard because education for profit still commands a bit of, you know, biasm in a lot of ways. Because when we're looking in the sense of like, okay, well, we can teach if you just understand a plant. So just go to school for
right,
horticulture in general, and you're going to understand how a plant works. If you become a botanist, you're going to understand how a plant works, and agriculture is going to understand how a plant works. But if you go in with only this very species specific concept, um, it becomes harder just because our culture is very much battling for like funds that come from maybe education for sale or pay for
yep,
play platforms. And so you never know which one's genuine or which one's going to honestly say, hey, actually, this one isn't applicable to you
right,
because you're in Ecuador. Um,
right,
that our practices are actually geared towards, California Mid Valley or something, and it's not necessarily going to apply towards your specific climate. So you're not as often going to see that sort of, you know, verbose clarity to somebody that wants to gain access because they just want to sell their courses. And
right,
so you have to really like be, genuinely looking, and also thinking about your climate in the way of like, okay, well, if I'm in the Caribbean, I'm going to be looking for more of a Caribbean study focus. While if I'm in a northern hemisphere in Maine, with high elevation, super cold
mm,
and dry, I'm going to be looking for more studies that are geared towards those climates, which will probably be like an indoor practices. And so
mm,
every educational base that you can find basically
Good point.
is just geared towards something different. And you have to inquire enough about it to know that, like, because otherwise you get pigeonholed and whitewashed until the whole world is, growing the same
Yeah,
freaking indoor model, which isn't necessarily good for everybody.
that I didn't even think about that, where in the sense that, okay, if you're teaching classes, it's not like one size fits all. Maybe that's like the
Mhm.
history of cannabis, like, okay, you can teach them a little overview of history or whatever, but actual implementation of growing and harvesting and all that stuff has to be tailored, I guess, just like any other class would be to a region, to a locality, to
Right.
a climate that's conducive to where they are, or alternatives, like you said, growing inside or a greenhouse, depending on where you are. Huh.
Right. And just some practices are general. Like, we know that certain cultivars will do at certain barometric pressures or certain humidities or certain light spectrums or UV spectrums within, the atmospheric color range that we have UV exposure. But like I've been studying genetic adaptation for years, and it's very genetic specific as well as practice specific. So if I'm going to be teaching somebody about, a uh, a smart pot or above ground aerated pot with soilless medium with an indica dominant cultivar that is anthocyanin bearing with no cover, it's going to be a different practice than if I'm working in a in-ground old coconut grove that's sandy and is has a sativa that is going to go for 12 or 13 weeks, and it requires a different nutrient base, a different water base, it requires different, shade times or chilling hours. And so you have to be really specific in identifying that. And then what is their area, like what can you allow? If you're only doing indoor grow and it's closet style, then cool. You can learn a lot more like broader spans knowledge and apply it. But you might have to like take a year and do a little bit of tuning and fine tuning when you're really trying to apply information that might not be specific to your region. Because especially during curing, if you don't have the right, humidity that's specific to your region, the right temperatures, the right effect, and when you're harvesting, as we've been speaking about, it has a lot to do with that. And then how the curing process is, it allows those cannabinoids to finish maturing so that you have your peak product
Hmm.
and peak ability to create the product in whatever region you're in. That can be like a worldwide. There's so many different microclimates and regions in the world.
Right.
It's hard to like, you just have to study each one specifically that you're within.
Right. Well, it's just like studying Western Asian history versus European history versus,
Right.
South American or North American history, or anything like that. It's cool. But yeah, we only got a couple minutes left, and I don't want to keep you. I know you got a lot going on, and you have dropped so much knowledge on. I'm sitting here trying to process everything you just said, so I'm sure everybody listening is like, what did these scientific terms all mean? Um, but they
Well,
were,
and feel free to ask me anything. I'll go into clarity and like I want to make sure everybody has a real like solid understanding about what we've discussed and that you leave like feeling like you're very clear.
yeah, no, I like having people like yourself give people like myself and everybody listening a spot to start. If they wanted to Google it and, start, if this is their first video or they've been here forever. And
Absolutely.
and
Each of
so,
these topics I have out in different articles that I've written in Weed World magazine or Dink magazine or Cannabis Now, and a lot of new focuses on the Virgin Islands too. So when you Google it, you might just find my name underneath these topics.
that's awesome. Hopefully they do. And I'll actually pin a lot of the links in the comment area, the description, so they can make it easier for them to go to. Um, and
Appreciate
I appreciate you spending some time with us and sharing your knowledge about the plant and where you think it's all going, and everybody's
you. To
on
hell
board.
if we don't change our ways, brother. To hell if we don't change our ways.
Hey, you're preaching to the choir here. Um, but thank you very much for spending some time with us. And until next time, stay blessed and don't forget to tip your bud tenders.
Oh, yeah. Have a
Um,
great night.